The Toba supervolcano left maybe 3,000 breeding humans on Earth. That's a small town. Everyone alive today came from that small town. And that wasn't even the closest call. 74,000 years ago, a volcano in Indonesia erupted with a force 3,000 times greater than Mount St. The ash cloud blocked the sun for years. Global temperatures dropped by up to 15 degrees Celsius. The human population collapsed to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 breeding pairs. We were a rounding error away from joining the dodo, but it gets worse. Around 195,000 years ago, a glacial period called marine isotope stage 6 turned much of Africa into an uninhabitable desert. The entire human species retreated to a few coastal refuges. Genetic evidence suggests we dropped below 10,000 individuals and stayed there for tens of thousands of years. One bad drought away from the final page of the human story. The Black Death in the 14th century killed roughly half of Europe's population, somewhere between 75 and 200 million people. It took 200 years for the population to recover. In some villages, every single person died. Survivors inherited empty towns, abandoned farms, and the trauma of watching everyone they loved die within days of showing the first symptom. The Columbian Exchange was not just food and ideas. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, they brought smallpox, measles, and influenza. Indigenous populations had zero immunity. In Mexico alone, the population dropped from 25 million to about 1 million in a century. That's a 96% mortality rate. The largest demographic catastrophe in recorded history. The 1918 flu pandemic killed between 50 and 100 million people in a single year. More than World War I and World War II combined. Young, healthy adults were the most vulnerable because their immune systems overreacted, filling their lungs with fluid until they literally drowned. Bodies piled up in the streets because there were not enough undertakers. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 is the closest we have ever come to deliberate self-extinction. For 13 days, the United States and the Soviet Union stood with their fingers on nuclear triggers. At one point, a Soviet submarine officer named Vasily Arkhipov refused to authorize a nuclear torpedo launch against American ships. He was one of 3 officers required to agree. He was the one who said no. Vasily Arkhipov is the reason you are watching this video. But it was not the last close call. In 1983, a Soviet early warning system showed 5 American nuclear missiles heading toward the Soviet Union. The officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, had orders to immediately report this for a retaliatory strike. He decided it was a false alarm. A satellite had mistaken sunlight, reflecting off clouds for missiles. Stanislav Petrov saved the world with a decision to do nothing. On at least 3 separate occasions, nuclear bombers have accidentally dropped their payloads over American soil. In 1961, a B-52 broke apart over North Carolina and released 2 nuclear bombs. One of them went through every safety mechanism except one. A single low-voltage switch prevented a 4-megaton explosion. That is 260 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. The human species has survived supervolcanoes, ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, and our own nuclear weapons. We are the descendants of the lucky ones. The ones who found the coastal cave when the desert expanded. The ones who lived on the right side of the village when the plague arrived. The ones whose submarine commander decided to wait. The scary part is not that we almost went extinct. Scary part is that we almost went extinct at least 7 times that we know about. And we survived each one by a margin so thin it disappears if you round to the nearest percent. A different cloud pattern. A different shift schedule. A different submarine officer. That's what separates 8 billion people from zero. Every human alive today is the product of an unbroken chain of luck stretching back 300,000 years. Not a single link could break. And here you are, at the end of that chain, watching a Stickman video about how many times you almost never existed. Subscribe for more stories of the invisible margins that shaped everything.